However, wondered how GTA stories were created. Nothing is original. Let me tell you what the key inspirations were. Starting with obviously GTA 3. Grand Theft Auto 3 revolutionized the gaming world in 2001, and its inspirations were rooted deeply in the gritty underworld of New York City. According to Sam Houser, one of the masterminds behind the game, two major influences stood out: the HBO series The Sopranos and Michael Mann's crime epic, Heat. The Sopranos had just hit its stride when GTA 3 was in development. The show's portrayal of the modern mafia, with its complex characters and morally gray areas, resonated with the Rockstar team. They wanted to capture that same sense of a criminal world that existed alongside everyday life, where mobsters had families and ordinary problems alongside their illegal activities. Michael Mann's Heat provided another crucial inspiration. The film's depiction of professional criminals and the intense, realistic action sequences gave the team a blueprint for how to portray crime in a more grounded, serious manner. The movie's Los Angeles setting may have been different, but its atmosphere of a city living and breathing crime was exactly what GTA 3 aimed to recreate. But the heart of GTA 3's world was always New York City. The team at Rockstar Games, many of whom lived and worked in the Big Apple, wanted to capture the essence of the city's underworld. They drew from real-life stories of mob activity, corruption, and the general grittiness that defined New York in the popular imagination. Liberty City, GTA 3's stand-in for New York, wasn't just a backdrop. It was a character in itself, filled with neighborhoods that echoed real NYC boroughs. The game touched on the city's criminal ecosystem, from street-level thugs to high-ranking mafia dons, corrupt officials, and everyone in between. The developers dove deep into researching New York's criminal history, drawing inspiration from infamous mob families and notorious crime scenes. They wanted players to feel like they were navigating a world where danger lurked around every corner, but also where opportunity for criminal advancement was always present. GTA 3's storyline, following a small-time criminal rising through the ranks, mirrored countless New York crime tales. But it was the game's open-world nature that truly set it apart, allowing players to experience this criminal playground in a way that felt revolutionary at the time. By focusing on these key inspirations, The Sopranos, Heat, and the real New York underworld, Rockstar created a game that felt both familiar and groundbreaking. It was a world that players could get lost in, filled with the kind of criminal intrigue and action that had previously been the domain of prestige TV and Hollywood blockbusters. Grand Theft Auto: Vice City, released in 2002, took players on a neon-soaked journey through the criminal underworld of 1980s Miami. Rockstar Games set out to capture the essence of a city at the height of its notoriety, drawing heavily from pop culture icons of the era. At the forefront of Vice City's inspiration was Brian De Palma's 1983 crime epic, Scarface. The game's protagonist, Tommy Vercetti, mirrors Tony Montana's rise from a small-time criminal to a powerful drug lord. Like Montana, Vercetti starts with nothing and builds an empire through sheer determination and ruthlessness. The rags-to-riches narrative formed the backbone of Vice City's main storyline, giving players the feeling of climbing the criminal ladder in a vibrant, dangerous world. Equally influential was the TV series Miami Vice. The show's stylish portrayal of Miami's criminal underbelly, complete with flashy cars, sharp suits, and palm tree-lined streets, provided a visual and tonal blueprint for Vice City. The game's aesthetic, from its pastel color palette to its architecture, was a love letter to the iconic 80s show. Rockstar's aim was to recreate the prime crime hub that Miami had become in the 1970s and 80s. This era saw the city transformed by the influx of drug money, particularly from cocaine trafficking. The developers delved into the history of this period, drawing inspiration from real events and figures in Miami's criminal history. The game's soundtrack was a crucial element in building its 80s atmosphere. Vice City's radio stations were packed with hits from the decade, covering everything from new wave and pop to heavy metal and hip-hop. This musical backdrop not only enhanced the game's sense of time and place, but also reflected the eclectic cultural mix that defined Miami in the 80s. Beyond Scarface and Miami Vice, Vice City drew from a wide range of 80s pop culture. Movies like Carlito's Way and Goodfellas influenced its portrayal of organized crime. The excess and materialism of the decade epitomized by films like Wall Street, found their way into the game's depiction of high-rolling criminals and corrupt businessmen. The game's humor and satire were inspired by the era's television, including shows like Magnum P.I. and The A-Team. These influences helped shape Vice City's over-the-top characters and sometimes absurd situations, balancing its gritty crime narrative with moments of levity. Vice City's setting, the fictional city of the same name, was a loving recreation of Miami and South Florida. From the sun-drenched beaches and Art Deco buildings of Ocean Beach, inspired by South Beach, to the Cuban-influenced Little Havana, every district was crafted to evoke a specific aspect of Miami's diverse landscape. By focusing on these key inspirations, Scarface, Miami Vice, and the broader tapestry of 80s pop culture, Rockstar created a game that was both a thrilling crime saga and a nostalgic trip through one of America's most iconic decades. Vice City allowed players to live out their wildest 80s crime fantasies, all set to a soundtrack of the era's greatest hits. The game's success proved that the cultural fascination with 80s excess and Miami's criminal heyday was far from over. It cemented GTA's reputation for creating immersive, period-specific open worlds and set a new standard for how games could incorporate and pay homage to their cultural influences. Now GTA San Andreas took the series in a bold new direction, drawing inspiration from the early 90s West Coast hip-hop scene and classic hood films. Rockstar Games set out to create a sprawling, diverse state inspired by California and Nevada, with a focus on Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Las Vegas. The game's primary inspiration came from seminal hood films of the early 90s, particularly Boys in the Hood and Menace II Society. These movies provided the blueprint for San Andreas's narrative, which follows Carl C.J. Johnson as he navigates gang life, police corruption, and family drama in the fictional city of Los Santos. Musically, San Andreas was deeply rooted in the West Coast hip-hop scene of the early 90s. Artists like Dr. Dre, Tupac, and N.W.A. not only influenced the game's soundtrack, but also its overall tone and themes. The game captured the era when gangsta rap was at its peak, reflecting the music's raw energy and social commentary. Rockstar aimed to recreate the atmosphere of early 90s Los Angeles, a time marked by rising gang violence, the aftermath of the 1992 LA riots, and increasing racial tensions. The developers did extensive research into the period, incorporating real events and social issues into the game's narrative and world design. San Andreas expanded beyond just one city, encompassing an entire state. Los Santos, based on Los Angeles, was joined by San Fierro, San Francisco, and Las Venturas, Las Vegas. Each city had its own distinct flavor, drawing from their real-world counterparts. The inclusion of rural areas between cities was inspired by the diverse California landscape. The game's portrayal of gang culture was influenced by real-life street gangs of Los Angeles, particularly the Bloods and Crips. The rivalry between the game's Grove Street families and the Ballas mirrored these real-world conflicts, adding authenticity to the game's depiction of street life. San Andreas also drew inspiration from conspiracy theories popular in the 90s, particularly those surrounding the CIA's alleged involvement in the crack cocaine epidemic. These elements added depth to the game's storyline and reflected the mistrust of government institutions prevalent in many urban communities at the time. The game's RPG-like elements, allowing players to customize CJ's appearance and skills, were influenced by the growing trend of player choice and character development in video games. This added a new layer of immersion and personalization to the GTA formula. Pop culture references from the early 90s were abundant in San Andreas. From clothing styles to car designs, from billboards to radio advertisements, the game was a time capsule of the era. TV shows like The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and movies like Pulp Fiction influenced the game's humor and dialogue. Hood films, West Coast hip-hop, 90s Los Angeles, and the broader cultural landscape of the era, Rockstar created a game that was both a gripping crime drama and a vivid recreation of a specific time and place in American history. San Andreas allowed players to immerse themselves in a world that many had only seen in movies or heard about in rap lyrics. The game's success showed that video games could tackle complex social issues while still delivering an entertaining experience. It expanded the scope of what was possible in open-world games and set a new standard for cultural authenticity in gaming. GTA 4 marked a significant shift in tone for the series. Rockstar Games aimed to create a more grounded, realistic take on the criminal underworld, drawing inspiration from gritty crime dramas and the complexities of immigrant life in modern-day New York City. The game's primary influence was the post-9/11 landscape of New York City. Rockstar wanted to capture the atmosphere of a city still grappling with the aftermath of a major tragedy, while also dealing with ongoing issues of crime, corruption, and social inequality. The fictional Liberty City of GTA 4 was a darker, more somber reflection of New York compared to its previous iterations. At the heart of GTA 4's story was the immigrant experience, particularly that of Eastern European immigrants in America. The protagonist, Niko Bellic, was inspired by the wave of Serbian and other Eastern European immigrants who came to the US in the aftermath of the Yugoslav wars. His journey from war-torn Europe to the streets of Liberty City reflected real stories of immigrants seeking the American dream, only to find a more complex reality. The game's narrative drew heavily from crime films and TV series that focused on the grittier, more realistic side of criminal life. Shows like The Wire and The Sopranos influenced the game's portrayal of a criminal ecosystem that extended from street-level thugs to corrupt officials. Films like The Departed and Eastern Promises also informed the game's exploration of ethnic criminal organizations. Rockstar aimed to recreate the diverse boroughs of New York City with unprecedented detail. Each area of Liberty City had its own distinct character, from the hipster enclaves of Broker, based on Brooklyn, to the towering skyscrapers of Algonquin, Manhattan. The developers spent countless hours photographing and researching New York to create a city that felt authentic, down to the smallest details. The game's more serious tone was influenced by the changing landscape of video games. As the medium matured, there was a growing appetite for more complex, nuanced storytelling. GTA 4 aimed to deliver a narrative that could stand alongside prestigious TV dramas in terms of character development and thematic depth. The game's satirical elements, while toned down compared to previous entries, were influenced by post-9/11 American politics and culture. From the xenophobic rantings of radio hosts to the overreaching national security measures, GTA 4 offered a biting commentary on America in the early 21st century. GTA 5, hitting the shelves in 2013, took the series back to sun-soaked California, but with a modern twist. Rockstar Games decided to blend the laid-back vibes of Los Angeles with a hefty dose of contemporary satire. The game drew inspiration from the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis. You've got Michael, this former bank robber trying to enjoy his ill-gotten gains in a world where the economy's gone sideways. It's like watching The Big Short, but with more explosions and car chases. Then there's the whole reality TV craze that was big in the early 2010s. Franklin's story feels like it could be straight out of one of those rags to riches shows, except with a lot more Grand Theft Auto. You can almost hear the cheesy narrator talking about his journey from repo man to high-stakes criminal. Trevor. Well, he's like what would happen if you took every over-the-top action movie character from the 80s and 90s, threw them in a blender, and poured the result into a trailer park. He's the game's way of poking fun at the series' own history of excessive violence and crazy antics. Rockstar also took cues from heist movies like Heat and The Italian Job for the game's big set-piece missions. They wanted to give players that feeling of pulling off a major score, complete with all the planning and tension that comes with it. The game's satirical take on social media, smartphones, and tech culture was inspired by the rise of companies like Facebook and Apple. Los Santos is a city where everyone's glued to their iFruit phones, obsessed with their Life Invader profiles, and it all feels pretty familiar, right? And let's not forget the influence of classic California crime stories. There's a bit of Chinatown in there, some LA Confidential, maybe even a sprinkle of The Big Lebowski, in how the city itself becomes a character in the story. GTA 5's Los Santos is like a funhouse mirror version of Los Angeles, reflecting back all the city's quirks and contradictions. From the phony wellness gurus of Vinewood to the gang-ridden streets of South Los Santos, it's all there, just cranked up to 11. The three protagonist structure, that was Rockstar trying something new, inspired by TV shows with ensemble casts. It's like they took the idea of changing channels and built it right into the game. In the end, GTA 5 is this big, crazy mix of crime drama, social satire, and action movie excess, all wrapped up in a package that lets you experience it firsthand. It's Los Angeles through Rockstar's eyes. Beautiful, absurd, and always entertaining. And it worked like hell. And that's it. There are other GTA games too, but all of them seem spin-off main ones, so I usually don't cover. Like the video, and don't forget to subscribe the channel. That's very important, and I will see you next time. Till then, take care.